What's up, everyone? Welcome to Cracker. This is Loki's Den, and I am your host, Loki Goblin 13. I had a extremely awesome, interesting morning that blew my mind. You never know what to expect, I'll tell you. But before I show you what I actually got from this interesting morning, which I was amazed, I want to thank a few people. Andrew Osborne, the Comic Strip 3, Comics Quest, and AnRange 11 for your comments on my last video, the trade thing, and the video where I was thinking of selling my collection. I appreciate the comments and the ideas and all that stuff. They were all really cool. I do have a lot to think about, but I'm also going to add this into here from what happened this morning. Very interesting, very interesting. My fiance and I had a talk last night because I was still going over it. It still weighs on me. I'm like, I kind of want to sell the collection because we really need the money, but then I don't want to sell. I was kind of still. I was like, I'll keep my Spider-Man, I'll keep my X-Men because those are the ones I love the most, and everything else I could kind of sell off. But I was like, it's still all me. And I was talking to some friends and family, and my friends and my family were saying, they're like, we've known you, your whole life, obviously, like my family. And some of my cousins were saying, like, that's always been your thing, comic books, and that's just been, who you are, And I'm like, it's not really who I am. I was like, it's a part of me, but it's not entirely me. But everyone was really cool. My fiance keeps trying to talk me out. She's like, don't sell anything, wait and see. If we really, really get down to desperation and you feel that you need to sell the stuff so we can get out of our hole, she's like, then it's all right, it's up to you. It's your decision. It's all your decision. I'm not, telling you to sell it. I'm actually telling you not to. And it was a whole big discussion. And she's like, everything changes, for us. 1 minute we feel like we're getting our ass kicked, and the next minute, things change and go our way for a little while. And she's like, we just got to ride things out. So I liked her thing. I was like, all right, I'm not doing anything like I've mentioned in the video. I'm not doing anything hastily. I'm not going to be like, tomorrow I'm going to sell all my stuff. No, I'm weighing this out a lot. Like, I keep going back and forth, and it's going to take some time before I actually decide what the hell I'm going to do. But an interesting thing, Seamus, he's weird, that happened this morning. My fiance's like, here's $10. She's like, I got the day off. Let's go for a ride. Maybe we'll stop at a comic book store or something like that. I'm like, I feel like something. You're not helping. On the way to the comic book store, this is why I'm saying this is just an interesting morning. We saw a yard sale when we were going to the comic book store. I was like, oh, yard sale. And I always look to see if anyone has, long boxes or short boxes, or if they have books out or something like that. And corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse. I think it was a short box. And I'm like, it might be a short box. And my friend said, well, you want to stop? I'm like, yeah, what the hell? Let's take a look. Seamus, I'm trying to tell people a story. Quiet down. He's crazy. Actually, I think I'll be right back. He's got his head stuck under the couch. Be right back. Sorry about that. His new thing is he tries to get on top of the couch, and when he can't, he tries to get under it. But his head is still too big to, fit under the couch. So sometimes he actually gets his head somewhat under there and gets stuck. Oh, man. Anyway, he's crazy. Anyway, we stopped at the yard sale, and it actually wasn't a long box. It was like just a regular white box, and I'm like, and this old guy comes out, probably in his 70s. I'm going to say maybe 75, give or take. And his name was Jim. So he's like, hey, how you doing? Very, very nice guy. And his wife is sitting in like a lawn chair inside the garage. And he's like, you interested in anything? I was like, I didn't get a chance really to look. And he's like, is there anything you were looking for? I was like, well, I thought that was a comic box. He's like, he's like, you like comics? He's like, then you've come to the right place. And I was like, really? And he's like, he's like, do I have a deal for you? And I was like, oh, man. And I was sitting there, I was like, okay, all right, whatever. He's like, let me tell you something. He's like, I've been collecting comics since I was, younger. He didn't say, like, how young, but he's like, since I was younger. And he's like, I have tons of comics that I'm willing to sell. And I was like, really? And he's like, unfortunately, he's like, I gave a lot of them to my son, years ago. I don't even know what he did with them. He's like, because I was into them. He's like, I don't know how much he was into them. And he's like, who's your favorite superhero? I was like, for Marvel, I like Spider-Man. And I was like, and for DC, I like Batman. And we were going on, and my fiance just kind of like amazed. Like, she's looking. She's like, I think I saw your future. And I was like, yeah. So I said, I was like, oh, you know, I was like, you got comics? He's like, yeah. He's like, I had a few boxes out of here before. He's like, but I moved them out of the sun. He's like, because I had the box. He was telling me this whole thing. He's like, I didn't want them to get, you know, too bad a shape. And I was like, okay. And he's like, hey, Spider-Man's my favorite guy too. He's like, I had everything Spider-Man. He's like, you know, and I was like, all right, you know, cool. He's going on and on, and my fiance was getting, she's getting like impatient. She's like, all right, well, where are these comics, you know? And I was like, all right, well, relax. And he comes out with this little box, which is like, you know, it was a little bigger than a short box, but it wasn't an actual comic box. And there was comics like stacked in there, like going upwards instead of rather going the long way. And a lot of them were in rough shape. Like a lot of them were just like they weren't worth anything. Like you just, you know, a lot of them I had, and a lot of the ones they just were in such bad shape that it was just like, you know. But some of the ones, you know, you look at them, you're like, oh, if like he had X-Men like number 12 and it was in rough shape, I still would have bought it. I'm like, yeah, you know. But he didn't have that. He had like a lot of other stuff. And he's like, yeah, he's like, these are all I got left that I'm looking to sell right now. And he's like, they're in kind of, you know, he's like, they're not great shape. He's like, basically, he's like, these are my doubles. And I was like, oh, okay, you know. And I'm looking through them, and there was really nothing, like like I said, a lot of things that he had in there I already had, and then I have them in better shape, so I wasn't going to try to upgrade. And then I found this stack. No bags or boards, because his reasoning was he wasn't going to bag or board his doubles, because he left his doubles were his reading copies. That's what his whole thing was. And he's like, you know, I don't really, he's like, I still collect, he's like, but I don't collect it the way I used to. He's like, because, you know, he's like, times are tough and all this stuff, and he's going on, and he's like, you know, I really, he's like, a lot of the new stuff, he's like, I don't enjoy. He's like, I like all the old stuff, and he's like, I already have all the old stuff. He's like, so what's the point of buying the new stuff? And I was like, all right, you know, hey, cool. So I looked through these, and like I said, some of them are in rough shape. I'm going to say like they're probably maybe good, negative good. Some of them might be a little better. But I grabbed this stack of the ones that I didn't have, and I was like, oh, these are cool. I was like, how much did you want for these? And he's like, which ones you got there? And I showed him. He gave me all these for $1. I got 4 books for $1. So basically they were a quarter a piece. Let me show you what they are, because I know I've been rambling, and was like, well, show the books. These are ones that I needed, and I was just, like I said, I was amazed. You can't beat that for a quarter. Amazing Spider-Man number 169. I needed that one. I was like, oh my god, you know, I thought he was going to say like $5 a piece or even more. But this one's in pretty good shape. The only thing wrong with it is got a little bit of it had like a tear kind of fold up here, and I folded it back so you can't see it. But other than that, it's in pretty good shape. A couple things here and there, but you know, for a quarter, considering how much money these are going for. This is another one. Like I said, I got the four for $1, so they were all a quarter a piece. This one is in pretty good shape, except for a couple pieces here and there. But it's Amazing Spider-Man number 172, which is the first Rocket Racer. Very cool. Only problem with this one is it's got like a little, you can kind of see like almost like a little tear. I don't even get a chance to really, yeah, it looks like something like was gnawing at it. Yeah, a little bit of a tear there. But hey, again, you can't beat that for a quarter. Amazing Spider-Man number 181. Another one I needed, obviously. This one's got some dings in it. This one's actually got like a crease going down. You can see it like near Spider-Man's crotch, and the back is kind of you know, you can see like the dings and stuff in it. But hey, again, for a quarter, I'm not bitching. And last but not least, this one's actually the one that's in the best shape, I guess, other than a little bit of a spine roll. Amazing Spider-Man number 191. Which now with this one, actually it does have, it's got a tear. I didn't even notice that until just now. It's got a little bit of tear right there. But as of now, I have all the 190s now. So, like I said, I'm going to sections. After the 180s, I'm missing. After the 170s, and I saw these, I was just like, oh my god. So I showed him. He's like, hey, he's like, I'll give you all 4 of those for $1. He's like, you know, no big deal. He's like, because they're in rough shape. And I was like, okay. Now here's where it gets even more interesting than that. I was looking at the comics, and like I said, that was pretty much it that he had that I wanted. And he's like, you know, are you a really big comic fan? I was like, yeah, I've been collecting since I was 8 years old. I was like, my cousin got me into it, and you know, I love it. And we were talking about stuff, and my fiance was talking to his wife about, you know, stuff. I don't know, Harry Potter or something like that. Apparently, his wife was into Harry Potter. Whole big thing. So he's like, well, he's like, are you sure you're a comic book fan? He's like, I was like, yeah. He's like, you want to see something cool? And I was like, okay, you know, hey, you know, what? And I'm sitting there, and then I was waiting that I'm gonna get like killed. I was like, this guy's gonna come out with a shotgun and blow our heads off and take my dollar, and leave the bugs. He's like, come on inside. He's like, you and your wife can come inside. And I'm like, and I'm looking at my fiance, and I was like, he's gonna kill us. I was like, but then I looked, I was like, well, he's an old man. I was like, you might be able to take him. I was like, but you can never underestimate the old folks, man. They can kill you. They can get you. So she's like, what are you doing? I was like, you want to stay out here? I was like, I'm just gonna go, take a look at something. And she's like, well, because we felt weird, but like, okay, we don't know these people, they're just inviting us into their house. And we walk in, and the guy's wife, what was her name? Peggy? I think it was Peggy. It was Jim and Peggy. Gives us like this iced tea thing. She's like, here, iced tea. And my sister's like, oh my god, they're gonna poison us first. So we're like kind of holding these plastic cups with iced tea, and I'm like, yeah. And she's like, I just made it. I'm like, okay. And when you walk in, the entire house was wall to wall comic book related things, and just it was nuts. It was almost like my dream house kind of thing. I'm just like, everywhere was comic book things. Everything. I couldn't. It sucks because this phone I have doesn't take videos that well, and the pictures, I took like 2 photos and it was all black. I was like, oh, son of a bitch. But it was nuts. It was absolutely nuts. And I'm looking, like, his living room was almost like a sunken kind of den kind of thing. Like, you go down a couple steps to get into the living room, and the carpet was Spider-Man comics, like not like an actual comic, but the whole carpet was like panels from different Spider-Man comics, like made into like a rug, into a carpet. And I was like, oh my god. On above his fireplace has this giant friggin' artwork, like somebody, I don't know if, I forget what he said who did it. I think he said a son's friend did or something like that, I don't know, of Spider-Man from Amazing Spider-Man 300 in his black suit with the webs. I was like, nice. Then he had an Incredible Hulk lamp, which you pulled down on the, it was cool. It was really cool, because he's like, like this. Basically, it was like there's Gizmo. It was like what the hell, like a street kind of like base, like, looked like the street or like a rock or something. And the Hulk's got like the lampshade, and then like the Hulk's hands are like this. And when you pull down on his fist, like he's smashed on the ground, it says Hulk smash when it lights up. And I was like, oh man, then when you do it again, he says like puny human. And I was like, oh my god, I was like, that's awesome. And I was just amazed. I was like, oh my god. And like what the hell, the kitchen had like an Iron Man like coffee machine thing, like it looked like Iron Man, like it was just insane. But then we're walking, he's like, come on down to my he said he calls it his comic factory or something like that. And I'm like, this is where I'm gonna get killed. It's in his basement. He's gonna kill us. And like everything was like, it was nuts. Like the staircase had like different symbols. Like one step was Captain America's shield, the other step was Spider-Man's symbol. Then it had a Venom symbol, and then it was like the Green Goblin's face, pumpkin bombs. I was like, oh my god. You get into this basement, which was pretty damn big, and it was just covered. He had the Spider-Man arcade game, and I was like, oh my god. I was like, oh. Next to that, he had the Avengers arcade game and the X-Men arcade game, and I was like, wow. I was blown away. I was like, oh my god. And then you go, and he opens up like these, it's like cut off. It almost looks like when you had gym class back in the day and they had a divider that would divide the gym in half, girls on one side or whatever it is. It looked kind of like that, but it was more like shutters, like you kind of just went like this to open them up. But even them, Wolverine was on there and all this stuff, like it folded, it was crazy. Opens it up and just boxes and boxes of comics. I thought for a second I was in Captain Strangelife's house. I was like, wait a minute. I was like, I'm looking around, I'm like, oh my god. I was like, I thought you said that's all you... He's like, no. He's like, I didn't say that's all I had. He said, that's all I had that I was going to sell. And I was like, holy shit. He had some doozies. He had some doozies, I'll tell you. He had Amazing Fantasy 15 in like a glass case thing that he got the idea, he said, from Nicolas Cage, where it rotates. On the opposite side, he had Amazing Spider-Man #1, and then right underneath it, it was Amazing Spider-Man number 14, which is the first Green Goblin. I'm sorry, it was number 4, which is the first Sandman, and then number 14, the first Green Goblin. I was like, oh my god, and like it was cool because the case he had, not only was it lit up and it rotated, but it actually had a thing when you hit the button, it would change different colors, and it would actually do the Spider-Man theme song. I was like, oh my god! I was like, wow. And he's like, yeah. He's like, I used to be an electrician. I used to be this. I used to be that. In my day. Seamus, I'm telling the story. You weren't there, so don't chime in. And he's like, so I built all this stuff, and I built this, and I built that, and he's like, I like working with my hands and all these things. I was like, damn. It was nuts. It was nuts, and I was like, wow. And I got a chance to hold Amazing Fantasy 15. I can't even talk. Held it in my hand. I was like, good God. I was like, this, was just amazing. And he's like, yeah, I figured you'd appreciate it. He said you were a Spider-Man fan. And he's like, it's always nice to meet people that appreciate, this stuff. And, I spent a long time getting these things and making them and doing this stuff. And, he's like, my family really doesn't he's like, my wife doesn't love it, but she, loves that I love it. And he was going on, and we were talking, and I was telling him about my dilemma. He's like, oh, he's like, you can't go by that. He's like, things change like that. He's like, in a heartbeat, he's like, things will change around. He goes, you gotta do what stuff that means stuff to you, and what's important to you. And he's like, obviously your wife's important. And he was going on. He's like, did she tell you to sell it? I'm like, no. I was like, she's actually been telling me not to sell it. He's like, that's a good woman. He's like, you listen to her. He's like, let me tell you. He's like, there was a couple of times. He's like, I've sold books that I regretted. He's like, I had the first Superman. He's like, and I sold that. He's like, back in the day. And he's like, for a quick buck. And he's like, I wish I still had that. And he's like, I had the first Batman. And I was like, oh my God. And he's like, he was just going on and on. He's like, if I sold them for like $300 back in the day. And I was like, oh man. He's like, I regret it ever since. He's like, granted, I'd be a millionaire right now. He's like, but I'm very happy with what I have. And he's like, I can't even talk. I was so amazed. He's like, he's like, I'm not expanding my collection. He's like, but I'm not expanding it the way I used to. He's like, I used to go out and buy like, boxes of comics and and he's like, I don't do that anymore. He's like, because I'm older now. He's like, I just kind of want to sit back, and he's like, I enjoy my collection. He's like, they were just going on and on. It was just awesome. It was cool. I mean, beside the fact that I got 4 books that I really needed for my Spider-Man collection, it was just cool hanging out with this guy. And I was like, and I kept telling my fiance, because she said it first, and I was like, yeah, you might be right. She's like, I see this guy's your future, basically. She's like, this is what you're going to be like when you're that old. And I was like, oh, if I get that old, I was like, maybe. So that is it. I've rambled on long enough. I'm sorry, but that kicked ass. That kicked a whole lot of ass, and it was fun. It was fun to see like that level of collecting in person. It was amazing. Just the stuff he had. Like I can't even. There's so much of an overload in my head from all the things he had. It was just nuts. Like he had another cool thing that was freaking rocked. Oh my God, he had. I actually have it, but he had. Damn. He had the Green Goblin action figure that I have, the Marvel Selects, I think it was, or something with the Marvel Legends. I don't know what it was. Where it reenacts the cover of him holding Peter Parker wrapped up in the wire, and he's got his mask off and whatever. He had this thing. Basically, it was connected to his ceiling. There was a track in his ceiling, like a line. And it was connected. I don't know how the hell you could barely see it looked like fishing line. I guess that's the best way to describe what he had. It was like a little thicker than fishing line, but that's like what it looked like. Connected to this goblin, and he took the thing. He opened up something, and I don't know what the hell he did. Like I said, this guy was obviously a master electrician because he knew what the hell he was doing. You push this button on the wall that it actually was. It looked like a light switch, but it was the Green Goblin's face, and it was like a button, like on his mouth. You push the button. Now, I think it was coming from the figure itself. I don't know if it was from the figure or if it was from that thing, but it sounded like it was from the figure. You hear like a web kind of noise, and then you see like the goblin will come from one end of the room to the other, and the glider actually, the back of it lights up, like he added stuff to make it light up. So the back looks like it's got flames shooting out, and it actually has smoke that shoots out a little bit. And the goblin is laughing the entire time he's dragging Spider-Man. And I was like, oh my God. He's like, some people, they collect model trains. He's like, I tinker with these things. And I was like, it was cool. It was cool. And the goblin, like, just him laughing. The whole goblin laugh and the smoke coming out of it, and it's lit up. And I was like, oh my God. It was cool. It was cool. Insane. All right, that's it. I've gone enough. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you don't like it, dislike it, whatever. Comment away. If you want to subscribe. That's always cool. Yeah, it was an interesting day. It made me think about a lot of things, and we'll see what happens. It was just cool. It was a lot of fun. You know, from thinking I was probably gonna get killed to actually seeing like a mecca of like this stuff. I'm just like, wow. But very cool. Guy had some sick ideas with certain things, and I swear, if I ever get a house and I get a basement or something large enough like that, I'm gonna try to do something like that, because that thing was nuts. Anyway, it's not the size of your cave that matters, it's what you have in it, and that guy had a shitload. Later, everyone.